Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. 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 Hi.
Hey, everybody.
I wish I could say hello in a lot of different languages. I can say it in English, and I live in Denmark, so hi, very similar. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk about scaling content and what does that mean, and how do you build a content supply chain and use agentic in order to scale your content well in today's world. And my name is Joshua Young. As I secretly mentioned, I live in Denmark, so despite my accent, don't let it fool you. While I am American, I live here in Europe, and I support the European business, helping the sales team, getting to participate in events like this as a go-to-market lead for content and collaboration.
Hey, everybody. My name is Ryan Hickling. So I'm a solutions consultant here in London for Adobe. So I tend to work for at more of a generalist level, I guess, across some of our enterprise accounts. And today I'll be taking you through some of the agentic capability we have in our content supply chain solutions. So great to meet you all.
Excellent. So content supply chain. If you've been to an Adobe event hearing about content supply chain in the last couple of years, you've seen a slide like this. I'm just going to touch on this for a moment because it's kind of the backbone of all of the other pieces we're going to talk about, which is thinking about the pillars of a content supply chain, which is how do you first plan and build workflows so your teams can collaborate in order to execute the creation of content. Then how do you actually create and produce that content? And then you want to be able to manage all that in a central asset management system so that you can distribute that across all channels and have multiple applications be able to access all the brand approved content in a central place. Then you want to be able to deliver and activate that out to all the channels that you are working with your customers in. And then, of course, you want to get insights to then be able to iterate all over again and start that process from the beginning so that the next time you build a campaign or piece of content, it can be even better than the last. So this is the content supply chain, but we see trends that are changing content supply chain today. One of them is customer engagement in the era of LLMs and AI agents. So show of hands, I'm expecting everybody to raise their hands. How many people here use ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, something basically almost every day? I'm sure most of you, exactly. So you as consumers are also influencing how content is found and how agents are looking at content to be able to help you find the right content as a consumer, which then affects you as a marketer. This is a massive impact to and a disruption to content and how content is created. Next is you want to be able to personalize at scale content for all of your consumers, whoever you're trying to reach in the different groups and however you segment your users, and you want to be able to scale that content well. When I've talked to customers who are focused on scaling content, sometimes they say to me, I don't want to create more campaigns, Josh. I just want to be able to personalize my campaigns better. And how can I scale better personalization and create the right content for the campaigns that I'm delivering? And then lastly, the explosion of channels that continue to explode and the shelf life of every piece of content is shrinking as you look at all the new channels. And I don't have this slide today, but we have slides that show kind of the half-life of content from TikTok, which is, the moment you upload that piece of content, you really have a mere seconds before that content is starting to degrade and isn't shown to people anymore. So the shelf life of content is shrinking, which means you have to create content even more at scale than before. So enterprise agentic ambition is real in order to help solve this scaling problem. So we've got two stats here. Enterprise marketers are using AI daily, 86%. I feel like you all raised your hands a little better than 86%. But how many here are actually piloting, deploying AI agents in your business? 71%? Yes, no, not many. This is a much smaller number. And I want to ask Ryan here. So you do a lot of meetings with customers, demoing, talking about our agentic proposition. How many customers that you talk to are actually leveraging agentic today or at least piloting and trying to see how it can help their business?
So I would say we've seen We've seen a change very recently, probably over the last few months or so. I'd say towards the start of the year, many of our customers were like you, essentially, individually within their teams, looking to utilize things like Claude, like ChatGPT, to aid their own individual workflows, right? So what type of MCP services can I link my Claude account into to help me just in my day-to-day job, this type of thing. Now what we're seeing quite recently is an uptick in the amount of our customers who are actively creating agents at an enterprise level and looking to operationally start testing those in the form of pilots and ultimately trying to answer the question of how do we scale those agents out across the organization, get them out of, I guess, individuals using them and then actually embedding them in operationally within existing workflows.
Interesting, yeah. So this is obviously a monumental shift in how we operate as a team, but a lot of the adoption is stuck in this, like, how can I use AI as an assistant? And true agent adopters are still sitting in the pilot phase, as we mentioned. So we're looking to help you, our customers, basically operationalize agents, move out of piloting and actually seeing a real positive impact to scaling content using agents. And so this means this flow that we saw earlier, going from workflow and planning all the way to reporting and insights, this slide, if we showed this a couple years ago, it would have been focused solely on people in each of these steps trying to help move content through the content supply chain. But today we want agents to be there to help accelerate. So we see agents are sitting in each of these pillars to help support your team. And then we want to be able to aid you in being able to leverage how those agents actually work across the workflow. So we have a lot of agents now that help kind of support each of these phases of the content supply chain. But what makes a content supply chain agentic? I'm going to talk about a couple things. Number one, enterprise context, which I think is the most important thing. Next, we're going to talk about how do you have knowledge about your brand, which can help scale that content. You need to make sure content you're scaling is brand aware and compliant. How do you use AI workflows to accomplish this? And then a conversational experience that you, as a marketer, will start to want to have similar to how you have as you're just kind of working in your private life on ChatGPT or whatever. So looking at enterprise context, what I like to say about this now, earlier everybody basically raised their hands when they said they use ChatGPT or some kind of LLM. My next question is, how many of you, when you use something like ChatGPT, get the response that you want in the very first time that you write a prompt? Mostly, I got a so-so maybe. Of course, it becomes a conversation, and that conversation that you're having is what's providing the context necessary to get the results that you're looking for. But if you think about this in an enterprise, you're not going to have a conversation. You need to provide all of that context to agents beforehand to make sure that what the content they're scaling for you is actually what you're looking to get produced at scale. So you lose out on that conversation, so you need to provide that context. And that context might be artifacts around creative, all kinds of information around your brand that sits in a ton of creative assets. I won't read each of these boxes, but touching on one or touching on things like workflows and the conversation you have as your team as you work on projects, the review and approval process, all of that is contextual information about your business that will drive the context needed in order to be able to scale with agents. So enterprise context is extremely important, and not having a conversation means you need to provide it to agents ahead of time by giving it all the knowledge around your business. And then we talk about knowledge about your brand, and a brand is more than just a style guide. A brand is a whole lot of information around tone of voice and language and a lot of other things. And I like this slide because the top of above the water, the little bit of the iceberg you see is the brand guidelines that you purposely create that dictate fonts and colors and things like that. But below, there's all kinds of tribal knowledge about your brand that you need to make sure the context is given to agents in order to create your content on brand for you. My analogy here is, bear with me. So above the line is how Joshua would describe himself, me. I'm talking myself in the third person. Below is how my wife would describe me. She has 26 years of tribal knowledge about me that I might not choose to share with you, but it really makes up who I am as a person. And that's the context that your brand needs to provide to agents in order to be able to make sure your brand is on brand when you scale that content creation. So here's just an example of a workflow. We're not going to go into this, but the idea is multiple steps in this workflow through the content supply chain process has a combination of people and agents working together in order to create the efficiency you need to scale content. I'm going to wait a moment. A lot of cameras. I don't want to... no, more came up. Now it's... All right. And the last thing I'm going to touch on is a conversational experience. So this is Michelle, and there's a vision that when Michelle comes to work in the morning, she wants to be able to have a conversation around what she needs to do that day, and how can we help her have that same experience at work as a marketer in the same way that she would have, as an individual talking to ChatGPT to understand something in her personal life. So how can I, as Michelle, come into work and say, what were the highest performing ads or what were the highest performing pieces of content for me yesterday? Help me understand that because I'm creating a new campaign for me. Help me create a new campaign based on the success from the past. Or help me make sure the creative team is getting this stuff done because the deadline's moved, etc. This conversation is what we want to be able to, at Adobe, let our marketers have across all of our applications that support the content supply chain. All right, so let's now look at this a little bit in action with help from Ryan here. So first of all, how to design an effective human agent workflow. So as we already saw, right, we want agents to work together with people. We want people to invoke agents. We want agents to sit in existing workflows. We don't want to have to focus a lot on change management, but use agentic to basically help us expedite that process and use agentic in order to drive this engagement. Here's like a visual of what this is going to look like, which we're going to see in a moment. But the idea here is we've got a workflow with people on your team, with agents from Adobe, with third-party agents, all of this together working in order to accomplish the content supply chain cycle for your team. And let's switch over to Ryan here and see a demo of this in action.
Cool. Thanks, Josh. Perfect. So I think my screen's coming through okay. So we've talked a lot already about, I think, the best way or potentially the challenges that are involved in utilizing agents across the organization. How easily can we embed those in existing workflows across the business so that our colleagues can all take advantage of them, right? Because there's advantages in that, in not just efficiency and effectiveness of the work that you're producing, that you and your teams are all working on, but also getting the most out of the tools and capabilities that you have at your disposal. So that's both Adobe tools and obviously any third-party tools that you might have as well. And one of I think, the quickest and simplest ways we've seen for organizations to start doing this in Adobe world is within Adobe Workfront. So for those of you who are familiar with Workfront, Workfront is essentially our work management platform, I would describe it as. So allowing you to create plans and essentially create processes that you can template and scale out across your business for any type of work that has a specific set of tasks that you need to log against it. Within Workfront, obviously, we are rolling out a new piece of functionality. I think this is broadly available today, and we are obviously scaling this out into the future to bring in more capabilities throughout the rest of this year. But in particular, that is AI collaborators. And what do I mean by an AI collaborator? That's essentially an agent. So it could be an Adobe agent. So any current Adobe agents that you have access to within any of your, Experience Cloud or technology. So whether that's an AEM agent, whether it's an AP agent, we're working to be able to help you bring those agents into defined workflows here in Workfront. But it's not just our agents as well. So it will be third-party agents. So any other systems across your enterprise that you're building your own agents with, so that might be anywhere where you can expose that agentic capabilities via the likes of MCP, for example, you will be able to bring those into workflows within Workfront to help you automate processes and scale the use of those agents out across the enterprise. Because once it's in here, and it becomes an automatic process that's run as part of the workflow. So just as a quick example, I actually have a Claude agent within Workfront here that's actually assigned as the program owner or the project owner for this specific Workfront project. Now I can give custom instructions to this Claude agent to essentially say, update me on my team or specific stakeholders against this workflow and this process whenever any critical updates happen on it. When a piece of content is approved, or maybe it's blocked, or maybe there's resourcing constraints, this type of thing, I can have an agent that's actively monitoring the project to then essentially notify me of whenever anything happens. I can do the same with other third-party agents. So you can see here against my landing page and social ad copy creation process, normally this would typically be a human. I would assign this task to an actual individual to go and write this copy. But if I'm just after some first draft copy here, and I already have a custom agent built within the business to specifically write that copy for me on my behalf, I can pull that agent into the workflow here and assign it as if it was an individual, so that the moment this process kicks off, it's basically activating that agent and performing the work for me and sending the results back into Workfront for the next task, so like copy, review, and approval. And obviously, we can do Adobe agents, so as far as Firefly goes, I think from a generative AI perspective, I think we've solved the ability today to create massive amounts of content, whether it be imagery, whether it be text on the fly, so to help you with personalization. But if I want to, let's say, bring in Adobe Firefly models for image generation into the process here, I can do that as well. So if, say, for example, this might be an ad campaign image for, let's say, a Facebook banner, potentially. If I want to programmatically and automatically have an AI remove the background of the image, change the background of an image, this type of thing, to something that's maybe more relevant to that particular segment I'm targeting, it's allowing me to personalize potentially tens, if not hundreds or thousands of different variants of an images, all kicked off via part of the workflow here in Workfront. And as well as that, we can obviously create new agents. So I can go into Workfront, go to my AI collaborators, and within this, I can hit Create New Collaborator, and this gives me the ability to essentially write a prompt for what I would like an agent to accomplish on my behalf, and this will build out my collaborator for me. I can also fill in additional details. I can integrate it with any additional enterprise context. So if I want to pull in information from elsewhere in the business, I can do. I can connect it through to external data sources. So if I want it to be able to reference data from any other platform, I can do that. And I can assign it expectations. So what do I want that agent to accomplish as this part of the task? What do I expect its output to be? What don't I want it to do? I can do all this from within the AI Collaborator menu. And essentially, this is allowing me to very quickly and easily, I would say, assign agents to any existing workflows that I think they will fit into in a potentially more deterministic fashion. So I can target specific tasks, specific projects that I think they will be the most value in.
All right.
Over to you, Josh.
Back to slides. So, number 2, ways to scale content production while maintaining brand quality. As we already mentioned, maintaining your brand is extremely important. If you're scaling and automating with agents, provide that context so that can happen. And we see that there's a lot of signals coming from that content supply chain. So a bit as we mentioned before, right? Looking at decisions that are happening, the design system you're using, all of these insights and artifacts feed that brand knowledge in order to make sure everything that's scaled is brand compliant and brand aware, so you can trust the content that's being scaled for you. And an example of being able to do this, generating on-brand copy, is a product that we have called Gen Studio for Performance Marketing. In Gen Studio for Performance Marketing, that's an AI-first product that we built, which was one of the first to really incorporate this idea of brand awareness and actually scoring of how well the content that gets produced through AI matches the brand standards that you outline ahead of time. So generating on-brand content is already in one of the products that we released actually a couple of years ago. And there's more to come. Here, I'll let you I'm going to give you the slides now.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So as an example of another agent that can help here, I think we're going to talk a little bit now about our brand governance agent, which is built into AEM. Obviously, with generative AI today, I mentioned earlier, we can produce massive amounts of content, so whether that be text, whether it be images, etc. But I guess from a business and an organizational perspective, how are we maintaining control out of everything that we're producing? How do we ensure that what is being creative remains on brand, that it adheres to our existing policies, this type of thing? How do we control that, or at least highlight areas that need to be highlighted in order for us to look into, to change, to amend on anything that's been created? And we need to do this in as efficient way as possible, because obviously if we're creating hundreds, if not thousands of net new assets, if I'm in any industry, it doesn't matter what type of industry that is, if I have to go through a review and approval process of thousands of additional assets on every campaign, that's going to become a massive bottleneck for my business. So this is where brand governance agent comes into play. So Josh has also mentioned earlier the importance of enterprise context. When we think about Workfront, which we've just been over, Workfront essentially acts as the store of context around projects that are happening within your business. So the state of work, essentially. What is approved, what isn't approved, does a project have resource allocated to it, what time frame is around that project, for example, what dates, deadlines, etc. Workfront is storing that enterprise context for your agents to take advantage of. When we think of AEM, that's also storing enterprise context around all of the sites, all of the assets that you have as well. So think copy, think metadata, think the actual images as well. So we have a record of that enterprise context that agents can take advantage of. In particular for the brand governance agent, this includes general governance rules that I can assign to the agent, or I can provide to the agent to make sure that it's checking against in my existing content workflows. So anywhere where I am producing content, generating content, that could be in Workfront, it could be in AEM, it could be externally of an Adobe application. I have an enterprise context store within the brand governance agent that I can call to check to see whether a piece of content is remaining on brand against some of the rules that I set up. So in the case of governance, that might be validating tone of copy, tone of voice. It might be validating what can I talk about in a line of copy, or what shouldn't I be talking about in a line of copy? What, as an AI system, or as any system, do I need to avoid talking about in the context of my brand or my products, this type of thing? So I can store all of that context within Brand Governance Agent to allow us to start automating the approval process or the brand governance process off the back of that. That works for identity as well. So when we think about your brand design, any guardrails around this, and also market positioning. So when we think on a brand-by-brand basis, any brands that you own, products that you own, how you position those products and services in the market to whoever you're talking to, how do we talk about the competitive advantage that you have? What competitive positioning do you always want to make sure you're talking about against specific products and services? All of this is context that we can now hold within the brand governance agent within AEM. But with that in mind, what do we actually do with it? How do we actually present it in surface results? So numerous ways. We are embedding this across different Adobe applications. So Josh has talked about Gen Studio for performance marketing. It is embedded there. And it is also currently embedded within workflows within AEM, where we will actively score and highlight all pieces of content that are produced. So we will give you a score as to how well that content adheres to the existing brand governance rules you have assigned, but also give you insights back. So, alert you to times or things that you need to be aware of that might be against your brand governance guidelines so that you can go back and amend them. So all of this happens automatically, and because this is an Adobe agent, as we've discussed, I can surface this agent potentially outside of Adobe tools. So I could embed the brand governance agent in Workfront as an AI collaborator, which we've mentioned at the start. Alternatively, I could potentially reference this in Claude Cowork if I wanted to. I could potentially reference this in any other agentic conversational interface that you're using, just to check if my site or an asset adheres to the rules that you've set in brand governance. Cool. Thank you, Josh.
All righty. So number 3, strategies for aligning AI agents to existing content operations, because you want to be able to work as your team works today, but you want to be able to use agents to help. So when we look at the evolution of the content supply chain, we see how we've worked with customers. Phase 1, maybe phase isn't the right word to say, but let's say the first process that people often do is being able to establish with humans, how do they work? How do you optimize your operations with your workforce? How do you centralize that metadata? How do you eliminate silos so people are working better together? How do you establish that enterprise context already by utilizing products like Workfront to be able to help establish that, or assets, AEM, et cetera? Then, when you have that in place, it's much easier to start to use AI-powered tools in order to get AI to assist the humans in being able to generate and scale content. So this will help you start to scale the volume much higher. It helps you boost output with Gen AI. And that's another step. Then the last, when you're trying to get to how do you become fully agentic, where agents and humans are actually working closely together, well, that's when you get end-to-end agent orchestration, where agents are sitting within your working team, as we saw a moment ago in Workfront. And then you can focus on unifying context to power AI, orchestrate human and agentic workflows. So there's this evolution of content supply chain, and all of our customers are at different stages in this process. We want to help support you get to an end goal of being able to leverage agentic more to help automate and scale your content. And when you reach that last point, Ryan's going to show us what is on the other side of that in this last demo here.
Okay, so we've seen AI collaborators in Workfront. We've seen an example of an individual agent within AEM in the form of the governance agent. How do we, I guess, bring this all together? So you would have seen earlier in our keynote session, you would have seen CX Coworker, obviously being able to orchestrate many agents together. But CX Coworker isn't the only place that happens. Anywhere where you are talking to an AI assistant within an Adobe application. So in this case, I have a screen of Adobe Experience Manager up here. You're essentially accessing the same underlying technology. So what I'm going to show you now is as if I was a brand manager, essentially, and I have a goal. My goal is to simply create a new microsite page or a landing page for an update to a product that I'm releasing. How can I do that utilizing AI if I just give it my intention? Right? So I'm not prescriptively assigning any agent here. I just want to give it my intention and then have it do the work for me. So within Adobe Experience Manager, I'm going to start by simply asking, can you create me a landing page, and what existing content do we have available along these lines? What have we used elsewhere that might be available for me to reuse? So behind the scenes, what's happening here is the assistant, CX Coworker, essentially, is going away and it's reasoning behind my request and thinking about what agents and what capabilities does it need to utilize in order to fulfill my request. So in this case, it might be using, let's say, some example capabilities within AEM assets to surface relevant content for the website I'm creating. So it does that. It goes away. It starts thinking about what content do I need based on the prompt or the instruction that it's just been given, and it starts to surface relevant content. Cool. As part of this, I think I've checked the existing assets that I have. At this point in time, I might want to request the creation of some net new assets, potentially. So how would I do that? Typically, across the organization, I'd probably need to raise a ticket, maybe initiate a new project to essentially go out to my creative agency to do some new graphic design, or potentially brief my own creative studio for this type of thing. Well, I can actually request that to start within the conversational interface here. So I can simply ask my assistant, can I raise a request to create a new version of some of these assets, maybe changing the brand colors because I need to update them. Well, again, the agent essentially reviews that request. it knows the capabilities that it's able to utilize, and that includes Workfront in this instance. So it goes out and automatically starts to create the new project or new task for this graphic creation, essentially within Workfront for me. So I give it the approval, it goes away and does that. So you can see that I'm doing this now all through just a single interface, essentially, because it knows my intention, and I'm not having to jump around between different solutions to do this. Cool. So it's asking me where I would like to create the page. So I give it a location, I drop it a URL, so I think it will look good here, please. And now it's going to start asking me questions about the site itself, because I asked to create a brand new landing page. So where is it going to get its knowledge, its enterprise context from regarding your landing pages? So typically, like, what templates do you have available? What constitutes a good landing page in the context of your business? Well, because we have that information within AEM's site, so we have existing landing page templates, we have experience fragments, this type of things, the elements that make up the landing page itself, it's able to start reasoning over those and maybe even start suggesting page templates for me to utilize. So it's going away and it's thinking about that right now. And I've put in an additional request here to essentially say, please utilize an existing high-performing template. So this is another crucial detail as well. So any reporting, data, and insights that this agent has access to, or this conversational service has access to, it's going to be able to go away and check out of all of the templates that we've used in the past, which ones have worked. Why have they worked? What is my most high-performing template in the past? Can I present that as an option for this workflow? And because we have the context of that stored within AEM, we could be pulling in the data and analytics data from the likes of Adobe Analytics here or CJA. Because we have that connection, the agent is able to make those results or able to make that inference and essentially start sending me back some examples on landing page websites to use or templates to use for my landing page that I've requested. So it's given me some recommendations. I'm going to choose the ones that I like here from several different content fragments. Excellent. So it started to add some content to my website. And now it's going to start analyzing all the content and the templates available to start generating me versions of that site for me to potentially preview and approve. So it's found one. I'm going to check that, and it's live generated me a website for me to essentially enter into the final QA process and publish later.
I want to ask you something here, because it felt simple, all the things that you just showed.
Yep.
But it's extremely complex. I mean, what would a human would have had to have done 3 or 4 years ago to be able to understand the performance of a page, find the best performing pages, be able to find a template to be able to build, maybe talk to a developer? I'm answering the question already, but what do you think? I mean...
Well, I mean, we've theoretically condensed a massive amount of work here into a very short time frame. I mean, obviously, when you think about what's gone on, not only have we've researched content that we might need for this web page, we've issued requests to our creative team to start generating new content. We've published a page, we've done the research into the data and analytics behind the scenes to, identify what landing page templates perform the best. So in order for us to do that would have been, in the past, weeks, if not months, of meetings between different departments to get at this data, to get at the insight, and to produce everything. But this is ultimately simplified now because of the use of agents. And it's worth highlighting again at this point in time that all of this functionality you've seen and the agents that we have under the hood that are doing this capability, they're all designed in a very open fashion. So I've mentioned MCP services before. All of those, as such, become accessible anywhere. So it doesn't matter what conversational interface you're using, essentially. I can start exposing this and bringing in external agents as well to form part of this conversation too.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to lose track of the complexity because of the simplicity that we see. But I like what you're about to show next, which is how do we actually look at this inside of a conversational interface that we're used to using.
Yeah. Just some very quick, simple examples. This is just a mocked up screen of Claude, for example, what could I do outside of Adobe in any other interface? If I have access to these capabilities within Adobe products and solutions, and I'm in, say, Claude, I'm in ChatGPT, Google Gemini, as long as I have access to add our MCP services across our tools, which is something that is a general product direction and vision for Adobe, is to start implementing MCP services across our applications and solutions, and that includes, in this instance, Workfront and AEM. So in the case of Workfront, if I have that available to utilize within any other agentic interface, I can come into Claude and ask simple questions like the status of active projects that are running across my organization. I can ask it to create my own dashboard because everybody loves their Claude dashboard. So I have data and context that's stored within Workfront that relates to the projects within my business. If I'm going into a meeting with senior leadership and I need to have a snapshot of active projects and their status, I can simply ask Claude to do that, and it's going to be able to pull that detail out of Workfront via the MCP service and present that in a cool-looking dashboard. Not only that, I can query the status of projects, the status of assets, what has not been approved, is there anything that I need to be aware of? And of course, with the latest update to these tools, if I want to have a schedule that runs on a day-to-day basis in Claude, in ChatGPT, because I can do that now, I could have a daily schedule that checks the content within AEM, within Workfront, just to check to see whether there's anything that I need to be alerted to on the state of my projects and assets across the business. So that's just one example. And just to finish, I guess, as well, if we think about how we could apply this to AEM, well, I can start talking to Claude about creating those microsite pages as well. If I want to create a new landing page within Claude here, I could even drop, say, Figma files within Claude itself. And because AEM now has the ability to take designs out of Figma files and turns those designs into entire pages, into experience fragments themselves, I can have Claude do that. So Claude can combine with the context of AEM data that it has, of site templates, of experience fragments it has, to start generating me pages based off of Figma designs as well. And as well as that, I can do things like convert content. So rather than just restricting myself to a web page, I could ask Claude to use AEM and the experience fragments that are available within it to then take that content I've just generated and adapt it to other channels. So whether that's email or anything else, for example, that we support.
Very interesting. All right, let's go back to the slides now. So just a reminder, so we just saw a whole lot of things happen. If we look at all the different three pieces that we looked at, right, we saw the ability to understand your brand and using agents to help govern the way your brand is managed inside content that's being created at scale. We saw the ability to integrate both agents and people all together in a workflow as a unified team. Then we were able to see how can we actually use agentic to create content for us and recommend content for us to be created, full web pages and full web experiences. And then how can we even do that inside Claude if we have an interest of using that as our interface? How can I make requests and do work within Claude? So many of our applications are able to be tied in with MCP access within Claude to do things like build dashboards or custom things that you need for reporting. So all of this is, I went backwards instead of forward, sorry. All of this is possible, but to make that possible, you need to make sure you address enterprise context. You need to make sure that you provide the right content and information around your brand so you can build effective brand experiences at scale. AI workflows are the way to accomplish that, and consider using conversational experiences as we start to see that more and more as the way that marketers, as well as us personally, like to interact digitally moving forward. So, summarizing all this, Adobe Gen Studio is our content supply chain solution for driving this agentic content supply chain world, where we look at agents and humans and workflows and context, brand, all marry this together into an easy way for you to basically go from the idea of a piece of content to delivering it and seeing how effective it is with agentic across a ton of different products that we saw and interfaces. And is there anything you want to add to the end of this?
I think that's a fantastic summary.
There we go. Very good. All right. So that's it for us. We're going to stick around a little bit. If you have questions, we can do that off the stage here in a moment. But if not, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for coming to the event today. I hope you have a wonderful summer planned. We're on the cusp. My summer vacation begins in a few days, so I feel like it's just around the corner. It's summer. Have a great summer. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.